Let's go. Welcome to Beyond Jiu Jitsu. I'm stealing Kieren's intros. What's up, bro?
Is that it? What happened to welcome to the Beyond Jiu Jitsu podcast, episode number 17.
17.
Today, we are talking about when you should start teaching. When should you jump on the mats and start laying down the law?
Well, yeah, when, should it be white belts helping white belts? No, it shouldn't. But before that, last episode 16, we spoke a little bit about how to choose your training partners and how to train with said partners. So if that interests you, you can go back and check it out. However, as Kieren said, today we're talking about when you should start teaching jiu-jitsu. This, a while ago, I don't know if this was before you started training, Kieren, but there was, I think it was the Gracie brothers, Hannah and Huron. Or was it them? There was an article going around saying that, you shouldn't teach until you're a black belt, and it was kind of like controversial, and people were arguing about which belt you should start teaching at. And then the Gracie brothers cop flack because they have the whole Gracie University system where you can get your blue belt online. I don't know if have you seen that?
Oh man, I have, and I have some look, I'm not really entitled to have strong opinions, but I have some strong opinions about that.
Well, I want to hear them, actually. This wasn't part of the script. Not that we work off a script, but it wasn't like a bullet point to talk about it. But usually I'm the one with strong opinions.
Yeah.
Most of the time, negative opinions. Actually,
I've gotten some messages about your blanket statements lately.
Have you?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to hear them. But before you say that, I want to say two of our listeners probably, well, I think they're our only listeners, Anthony and Marina.
Yeah.
They're two students of mine, and they're a couple. And Anthony's a blue belt, Marina's a white belt. And so Marina hasn't been training too long. Anyway, they listen to the podcast when they go out for a walk, right? And we had an episode, what was it? The episode number, which episode was it?
What was the topic?
Where we were talking about flow grappling and media.
Oh, I think that was episode 8, around there, 8 or 9 or 10 even.
I have
8, 9, 10.
I have it in.
I think it was episode 10 actually. Yeah,
anyway,
media was episode 10.
Well, okay, episode.
Take my word
No,
for
that
it.
was competition.
Oh fuck.
Episode 11. It
Okay.
was. There we go.
I thought that was cross training.
No,
Anyway.
that was episode 12. You might be right. My spreadsheet might be wrong. Anyway, one of those episodes, and it was. And I was on Zoom with them, and Anthony and they were walking along listening to the podcast, and Anthony's like a big fan of flow grappling and everything. And anyway, that whole episode was me pretty much
Passion on flow grappling.
not being the biggest flow grappling fan. And during them listening to the podcast, Marina actually turned to Anthony and said, "Oh, you know what? I actually agree with Adam here."
Oh no!
And Anthony like paused the episode and he's like, "Whoa!" Anyway, they've since separated.
No, they haven't. Yeah, so my strong opinions on getting a blue belt online, and it's the similar to that, the celebrity program that they do for jiu-jitsu where you pretty much get a brown belt without rolling.
Yep.
Who was the famous guy, the actor? What's his name? I'm blanking.
There's
Comedian that got a brown belt and he's never rolled. And I think it only came to my attention because there was a video of him.
It's the person who runs that program is Higan Machado.
It is. Yeah.
I believe it is, right?
Yes.
And heaps of actors train with him. That's where Ashton Kutcher trains.
Yeah, Ashton Kutcher. I saw it was a video of him like quote unquote rolling with Craig Jones, and he looked like a white belt. And he had a brown belt. And I mean, look, I'm not bagging out the fact that they want to train and that this is an alternative to not to being able to train without rolling, right? And like without getting your face scratched up, which is pretty much injury prevention and, protecting their moneymaker, right?
Yeah.
But look, they shouldn't be fucking wearing a brown belt. Like Ashton Kutcher should not be wearing a brown belt.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I don't give a fuck what anyone says.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's exactly that. I'm not against the program as a whole because,
but not
like you said, it's their moneymaker.
Yeah.
Especially if they're they're wanting to do some jiu-jitsu because they like it as a hobby and they're in the middle of filming a movie. Man, they can't get bumped in the face or whatever.
But if you want to wear a fucking brown belt, you better have earned that brown belt. And again, I'm coming from someone that is a white belt here.
You've heard that here first.
I'm a white belt.
White belt says you want to wear a brown belt, you got to earn that brown belt.
Yeah. Like I'm talking as though I'm a fucking black belt. But I mean, I think I can talk about it from the other side. Like I'm busting my ass trying to earn my first colored belt. Like, that being a huge milestone.
And then you see people get it for doing nothing.
Well, you see people getting it online. And I mean, okay.
Look, I will say though, in Ashton's defense, Craig makes a lot of people look like white belts.
Yeah, fair. No, but look, man, Craig was sitting in Turtle.
No,
if you haven't seen the video,
for
those that haven't seen it, Craig is like sitting in Turtle and Ashton is like running around his back and just being a goose. Like he's not a brown belt. He's not moving like a brown belt. He's not acting like a brown belt, where Craig Jones was in a passive position, not even moving. So it wasn't like Craig was schooling him, but it was really weird. And even I saw it and I was like, oh.
Yeah. But I think, you have to, you can't be wearing a brown belt and have not rolled or don't, or, you
100%.
might choose to roll a minimal amount, but, but that's what the sport is, I always say to people, and I probably said it in a previous episode about competing, if you don't compete, it's like only training football, but then never actually playing a game.
And imagine not even rolling. That's even like, that's 100 times worse, 1,000 times worse. That's, that's the sport. That's what you're there for. Some classes that you run are just rolling, like competition prep classes.
Well, it's kind of the equivalent of at school when the teacher wheels the TV in because they just want to phone it in. Like, guys, grab a partner. Roll. No, there's madness the warm-up behind the method.
The warm-up is a 5-minute flow roll and then straight into more rolls.
Yeah.
I love those classes.
Typically comp prep, right?
Yeah.
Just sometimes you're just needing to put in the hours of rolling.
100%.
Yeah, so by the sounds of it, you're against getting a blue belt online.
My God. Getting a blue belt online is, man, if you are listening to this and you got your blue belt online, I don't give a shit. I don't care if I insult you. Fuck you, man. Like, you're not doing jiu-jitsu.
It is funny. I do like that from your point of view, though, because...
Nah, man, that's fucked.
But I think it's an interesting point of view because you could easily just think, what's this white belt? No, but you said it so perfectly. You're someone who's busting their ass to try get a colored belt. And I know because you're my student, you do bust your ass. You train a lot. Not at the moment because the gym's closed.
Well, no one's training.
No one's training in Sydney at the moment. But yeah, well, COVID-wise, maybe now it's okay to get a blue belt online.
No, it's not, man. It's still not okay. It's how you were talking about that whole Crionchi thing in Brazil, and like when you need to move for work, and it's like it used to be so bad in Brazil. For those that don't know what I'm talking about, the whole like loyalty to your gym used to be so bad in Brazil that if you move away for work, then your instructor was pretty much like, all right, well, you need to give up jiu-jitsu. If you can't train here, you can't train anywhere.
Yeah.
That's how I see about belt progression. Like if you can't roll for it, you aren't a blue belt. If you've never rolled, how are you a blue belt? Like imagine if someone that went through a online academy, even if they were like quote unquote studying jiu-jitsu online for 2 years, and they step foot in your gym and they're wearing a blue belt and they roll up against, someone like a white belt, like myself, I would fucking school them. Like unless they're like a freak of nature, like I would destroy them. And I'm not saying that every blue belt needs to beat every white belt. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it's just impractical. It doesn't make any sense from a martial art that prides itself on belts actually meaning something. Having someone get mailed their belt from fucking eBay for completing an online course.
You know what it makes me think about? It's kind of, how nowadays with technology you can get wave pools, right? Like surfing wave pools.
Can you? Oh, right. Oh,
well, not get as in you can't buy one, but Kelly Slater made a wave pool or wave generator or whatever.
Yeah, those are cool.
And I think there's a lot of crossover between jiu-jitsu and surfing. And I often use a lot of analogies between jiu-jitsu and surfing. And one of my students, I still see him as my student, but unfortunately he's moved away. Ethan, really good blue belt has moved and left Sydney to take on a job writing for Slab, which is a surfing magazine. So now he lives up in Byron now and trains up there. He interviewed me a little while back for an article he was writing for Slab about a lot of the crossover between surfing and jiu-jitsu and a lot of the things they have in common and all that. And it kind of makes me think, this conversation makes me think, when you say, oh, if you've never rolled, imagine someone who could surf and they came up only ever surfing in an artificial wave pool. Would you consider them like a surfer, or do they need to go surf in the ocean?
Oh, fuck, man. I mean,
I know it's different, but it just made me start thinking about
if they couldn't, okay, so let's extrapolate on that analogy. If they were unable to surf in the ocean, like if they couldn't catch a legitimate wave because of, the constraints of a wave pool, for example, if they were unable to, paddle onto a wave. I mean, I'm not a surfer, so, excuse me here, but if they were unable to, then no, they can't surf.
Yeah. Well, because there's a lot of parts of surfing that aren't applicable when it's in a wave pool, right? Wave pools generate more or less the same wave on repeat. You don't need to paddle out, right? And for anyone who doesn't surf, what I mean by paddle out is at a beach break, you often have to, there's ways you can get around the waves, but essentially you can't completely bypass them. So you need to paddle into them and duck dive, like dive under the breaking waves with your board to get out the back, behind where the waves are breaking to then start catching your waves. You don't need to do that in a wave pool.
Yeah. So if you're unable to paddle out, can you surf? The answer is no.
Yeah.
Because there's an element of
well, it's
surfing.
kind of similar.
Yeah, it is.
However, it's a great tool. The same way that learning jiu-jitsu online is a great tool to enhance your jiu-jitsu. Yeah. It's the same as wave pools, right? Like, imagine if you had access to one and there's no surf, like as in the ocean, there's no surf because there's no swell, but you can still go surf.
Fantastic.
Or you can put in hours and hours and hours on the same wave, practicing whatever. So then when you do go in the ocean, I think more common access to wave pools is going to make professional surfers level up massively.
Yeah, agreed. It's kind of like
probably like with the internet and online learning for jiu-jitsu made high level competitors level up a lot.
Exactly. It's the same, but it's not instead of.
No. It's instead of.
A bonus. It's like the icing on the cake. It's not the fucking cake.
Yeah.
Like, I can't.
12 minutes later, we haven't spoken at all about teaching jiu-jitsu. We've been riffing on and paying out getting blue belts online.
Man, it's kind of like if you...
It's fired Kieren up. It's the first time.
Yeah, man, yeah. If you rocked up to a
Episode 17
seminar...
and it's the first time Kieren's gotten all heated.
Oh, man. Like, imagine if you rocked up to a seminar and you're like, oh, okay, where'd you get your blue belt? Oh, eBay. It's the same shit. Come on, man. Put your head in. I'm mad.
He's mad. All right. Moving.
White belts.
So... You need to roll to get your blue belt. Kieren has established that.
Mm-hmm.
When should you start teaching? Obviously, I've taught jiu-jitsu for a long time and taught people how to teach jiu-jitsu. You have not done any teaching of jiu-jitsu, but you've done plenty of teaching and coaching in your career. You would teach people ship navigation, right?
Navigation
in the Navy,
principles,
as well as being a nutritionist. You could argue to some extent, depending on how involved you are with a client, you're teaching them nutrition and teaching them how to meal prep and whatever, depending on
100%.
So, you did PT as well. You're teaching people how to lift, how to work out. So you've done a lot of teaching, and there's a lot of important parts of teaching, regardless of what you're teaching.
Yeah.
So there's certain attributes good teachers have, regardless of if they're teaching jiu-jitsu or if they're teaching you how to stuff a Build-A-Bear, right? Do you know what Build-A-Bear is? Yeah. I'm not sure if that's still around, but yeah. So when do you think, as a white belt, when do you think is it okay for someone to teach? So I guess the question I'm asking is, if you walked into a gym to do a class and the instructor is insert color belt here, what color belt would you as a white belt then go like, well, this isn't legit?
So what belt would I say it's not legit, or what belt would I be okay with?
No. So I want to know what belt you wouldn't be okay with. At what point would you go, this student, why am I learning from this color belt, from blue belt?
Blue belt, yep.
What if, What if they got that belt online? Is that cool?
So, yeah, that's totally fine.
Yeah. So you as a four-stripe
Ashton Kutcher brown belt. That's totally cool.
So you as a 4-stripe white belt, you saying blue belt is not high enough.
Yeah, correct.
Obviously it comes with some knowledge. If you were a day 1 white belt, I
could learn so much.
You could learn a lot from it.
Now, when I say I'd be like a bit iffy about it. I mean, I learned so much from the blue belts at our gym. They teach me all the time. So they do instruct me. What I'm saying is I would be a little bit not hesitant. Like it would depend on the individual, but as a general sweeping statement, if I came into a class and it was a blue belt teaching, I would be a bit in the back of my mind. I would be okay. That's bit low for this. And again, that's not saying anything against. That's just a very sweeping, generalized statement because I know there are blue belts out there that teach, and I know there are some that do it extremely well. So
yeah. I think that's a good distinction as well to make, that we're talking about teaching from an instructor standpoint. Obviously, just teaching in the gym, not even teaching, helping your teammates.
Oh, completely
that can kind of happen at any belt,
Oh, yeah. And it's different to doing a private as well, I'd say. Like if you're like, because I've done like training sessions with training partners that are blue belts, and it like half of it was pretty much a private lesson, them teaching me. I don't see that as the same either.
No, yeah. So that's not what we're talking about, because people often joke about white belts teaching white belts, but I mean, if it's coming from the right place and it's knowledgeable, everyone's different. Some white belts are incredibly knowledgeable, and they might just be teaching you something. Hey, don't do this because you'll break your finger. Or something like that. So that's not what we're referring to. I mean, teaching as a point where you say, oh, this is so-and-so, they're an instructor.
Yes.
So for me, we'll start at blue belt, right? Blue belts for me, definitely shouldn't be teaching adult classes.
Yeah.
However, a blue belt can definitely teach kids, right? Kids classes, you could have a white belt adult teach kids, really, depending on the age of the kids. Because a lot of what you teach kids in jiu-jitsu, it's definitely not super complicated jiu-jitsu. And if you're looking at young kids, like the 4, 5, 6-year-old kids, it's barely jiu-jitsu. You're teaching them through games, right? Because the kids can't understand the complexities of even the most basic technique. You teach your kid a scissor sweep or something, a 5-year-old a scissor sweep, and they barely know, some kids, they barely know the difference between their left and right. You tell them to put their hand here in the collar. They don't really even know what a collar is, So you're not really teaching them a lot of jiu-jitsu. You teach them through games because it's easy for them to digest and it's fun for them.
Yeah, and you're developing those motor skills early.
Yeah, I mean, I actually say this to a lot of parents who inquire. Obviously, I'm biased towards jiu-jitsu being the better option, but I often say, look, kind of at that age, it doesn't matter. It could be kung fu, karate, whatever. All these, as long as the instructor is good, a lot of the skills that the kids are developing, like discipline, punctuality, coordination, all the fine motor skills, teamwork, all those skills are going to be developed in whatever martial art, or to some extent, whatever activity they do, as long as the instructor's good. So it's not like you need to be super proficient at jiu-jitsu to teach kids. If you're starting to teach older kids, as in, 10, 11, 12, 13, getting into teenagers, I would say depending on how long that kid has been training for, you would need to be a bit higher. Like we have Ellie in the gym, who's one of the kids who's been with me the longest and is 14 now. And, Ellie helps teach the younger kids, like the little 4, 5, 6-year-old kids with me. Ellie knows heaps of jiu-jitsu. So you could be a blue belt and know less than Ellie, because Ellie's been training for like 3 years and trains every day and, knows a lot. So once you're getting to those higher kids, you might need to be a bit older. But for like the little kids where you just play games and all this sort of stuff, you could be a white belt. It's more about you being a good instructor or being a good kids instructor opposed to being good at jiu-jitsu. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
You haven't taught kids, like I know because your partner works in with daycare that you have sort of, do you have any, I know for those who don't know, I know Kieren has no kids or might have some illegal kids.
No, don't. No,
I mean, so
you can't prove it.
Because some people take to it really easily, right? Like teaching kids in whatever they do, whether it's they've already got their own kids or they've got nieces and nephews, or they grew up with a younger sibling that has a massive like age gap between the younger siblings. So some people take to it really easily. You know, I don't have any nieces or nephews other than my ones in Brazil, but I never, you know, I spent a lot of time with them, but not enough where I kind of just naturally was able to teach kids. It's something I had to develop and work really hard at.
Yeah.
Have you had any, like, do you have nieces, nephews?
I got about 15 nieces and nephews.
Do you actually?
Yeah, straight up. Like not even taking the piss. Yeah.
Are you being serious?
I'm being dead serious. I got 3 older sisters. Family tree time. I got 3 older sisters, and the youngest one is like late 30s, and they all have kids.
Really?
Yeah. Like I think one of them has like 2 of them have like 5 kids, and the other one has 2.
Jesus.
Yeah. So it's like 12.
Are any of them in Sydney? Because you didn't grow up in Sydney.
No, they're all up north, like Newcastle way.
Prior to COVID lockdown, would you see them often? Or
not really.
Well, I mean, I guess prior to that,
they don't listen to this. I can talk shit.
I guess prior to that, you were often at sea or whatever.
Yeah,
anyway,
I was in the
right?
Navy, so like, you know, I've been living in Sydney for the last like 2 years, but I've lived in between Sydney. I lived Northern Territory for a little bit, and a very short period of time over west in Perth. Very, very short on a ship, so it doesn't really count. So yeah, but I don't really, like, back to your point, do I have a lot of experience with younger siblings and things like that? Not really. I was the youngest of 5, and I haven't really spent a whole lot of time in my adult life around my nieces and nephews since I have been in the Navy for most of my adult life up until recently. So if I was to begin teaching at Blue Belt, that would be something I would need to work at as well, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, it was the first kids class I taught, the very first one ever. It was me by myself with 2 kids. They were brothers, and they were, how old would they have been? Something like the youngest was 4 and the other one was 7, something like that.
Oh, shit.
Me by myself, these 2 brothers, and the mum sitting and watching. And it was the first ever kids class I had taught, and I was just petrified, not of the kids, but it's really the parents you have to impress, right?
Yeah.
I remember I was so nervous, but you know, it went fine. And as time went on and I did more studying and I took more classes in how to teach kids, now it comes really naturally for me. And this was even before my son, who's 2 now, even before having Atlas, it had already become really natural for me how to interact with the kids and play with the kids. And once you get the hang of it, it's fine. You know, it's just getting past that initial really feeling like no idea what to do and be scared of the kids or whatever. But the kids can be heaps of fun. Teaching kids can be fun. It's not something I spend a lot of time doing anymore. Like I got into Jiu Jitsu to teach complicated Jiu Jitsu. You know, I want to be teaching adults really high level Jiu Jitsu, but I do enjoy teaching the kids. I still teach them every week when the gym's open, and they can be really fun. Other times they can be really hard. I remember this one kid, his name was Noah, who's super cute little kid. He had a bit of a lisp. And look, one day he just came up to me and he goes, "Adam, Charles won't stop licking me." I'm like, "Charles, stop licking Noah."
That's weird.
Yeah. But I mean, it's just how it is, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes they're just super funny. This little girl, she's so cute. One day I was teaching and I was sitting down, and she was there waiting for her older sister, who was doing the older kids class, because we have the kids separated in age groups. So she would do her class and then she would sit and wait for her older sister to do her class. And I was sitting on the mats, and she just comes up to me, and her head is about at my shoulder height when I'm sitting down. And she stands next to me and she just leans her head and rests her head on my shoulder. And just out of nowhere, she goes, And I wish you had a six-pack like Batman does. and I was just like, yep, me too.
Well, we can fix that.
Like the kids can be funny, man.
That's hilarious.
Like
Holy
there's
shit.
there's like anything, there's
Yeah.
pros and cons to it.
Yeah.
But like I said in the beginning, you could really be a white belt. The reason I say blue belt is just it's a good line in the sand.
Yeah.
It's also a good distinction between the kids because then regardless of what color belt the kid has,
They'll never outrank
they
you.
don't outrank you. Yeah, because you need to be.
How can you grade someone that's higher belt than you?
Yeah, right. Like, so if the kids are a gray and white belt, which is the one after white, they technically outrank you, right? So that's why blue belt makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. However, if you were good with kids, if you were like your partner who works in a daycare, you could essentially
throw her in,
give her an hour of jiu-jitsu like training and get them to teach a kids class, right? Of the younger kids.
Yeah.
But yeah, blue belt's just a good line in the sand. If we want to talk about adults, how do you feel about a purple belt?
Totally fine.
Totally fine.
Totally
as a
cool
white belt, cool with purple belts teaching you?
Absolutely. I love it. Yeah. So as is a purple belt at our gym, and he's taught a bunch of times, and Andreas, a brown belt, has taught a bunch of times, and absolutely no dramas at all. I think
Andreas being a brown belt. Did you say that?
Yeah, I said brown. So having Az teach as a purple belt, totally cool with it. Because I think, and again, circling back a little bit, I'm not against a blue belt teaching me anything. Don't get me wrong. I'm not as arrogant to think that I wouldn't be learning. It's more just as a sweeping statement to be like a more or less full-time instructor. From my perspective, I think purple belt is the place where it should begin. Just from, again, limited experience that I have, from my position as a white belt, I'm more than comfortable to be instructed full-time, more or less, by purple belt.
Yeah, I don't mind purple belts teaching. In an ideal world, like if someone just asked me, in an ideal world, what belt would teachers be? They would all be black belts, right?
Yeah, of course.
It's not how it works realistically. And I'll give some examples to that later down the track. But in my situation, when I first opened the gym even now in terms of a business is still new. It's only 3 years, already survived not one pandemic. It's the same pandemic, but already survived one, forced closure last year and now going through a second one, which we're going to survive because it's how we roll. Right? No pun intended, or maybe it was, I don't know. So
terrible.
Man, what's wrong with puns are great. Dad jokes, man. You got to get on the dad joke train.
Well, maybe in a few years. Maybe.
I think I have a theory as to why dad jokes are called dad jokes. It's because it's not until you're of the stereotypical age where you would have kids and become a dad that you don't find fart humor as hilarious anymore. So you have to resort to dad jokes.
Yeah, right.
Right, because prior to that, I mean, it's all still about fart humor.
Yeah,
you're still in the fart humor stage. So, like I said, in an ideal scenario, you'd have everyone as a black belt. However, having a new gym, just logistically, that doesn't really work. For example, when we had Atlas, right, the gym was less than a year old. So that time off that I had when my son was born, I had to take, actually I had very minimal time off. Atlas was born on a Sunday at like Sunday afternoon and I taught class Monday, 7 a.m.
Yeah. Back on the mats, boy.
Yeah. But then I had a few days off and a lot of that, like I had blue belts teaching because it's a new gym. It's, I'm not a name that opened a gym and I instantly was inundated with these higher belts swarming to come and train with me, right? So, I still had a lot of lower belts in the gym. So I had, Chris, who was the first blue belt I gave out, but also a good friend of mine, Chris helping teach and, and whoever helping hold down the fort for me. And, and that still sort of happens now. Still being a new gym, I have, purple belts teach and brown belts teach. And I think purple belt is a good point to start understanding teaching better. It's not where I would say I'm super happy in permanently putting someone in an authoritative instructor role.
Like a head instructor?
Definitely not a head instructor, right?
Yeah.
For me, a head instructor should really be ideally a black belt, maybe a brown belt, maybe, but brown belt, I'm happy to say like, oh, this person is one of the instructors. They're not the head instructor, but they're one of the instructors. Purple belt's a good time to start diving into that role and understanding it. I wouldn't really want to have a purple belt as an adult instructor, like, full time, I don't think, right? If it could be avoided, because it's still, there's still like a lot of unknowns. They still don't quite know enough yet. And everyone's different. I mean, sometimes you meet a blue belt who knows more than a black belt, right? Everyone's different. But purple belt is a good place to start understanding more about teaching. So when you do get your brown belt, and you can then go straight into becoming an instructor. So I like to see purple belts teach, some of the more basic stuff. And that's important because teaching, it's not very hard to teach higher belts. Teaching higher belts or running competition classes and whatnot, it's very easy, right? What's hard is teaching brand new students. So if you get someone who's just come in off the street and they're a zero stripe, right, they're the people who are hard to teach. Anyone can teach a competition class. You can get it can, to some degree, a competition class can almost be like running an open mat, right? So purple belts, I like to start, for me as an instructor who's now teaching people how to teach. Purple belts, when I start to sort of take that student and I want to see them, I want to train them up at being able to teach beginners. And I mean beginners from someone who's never trained, right? It's not only because that purple belt doesn't know as many high level techniques and advanced techniques and concepts, right? It's not just, oh, you're closer to that gap, so you should teach beginners. It's because that's the hardest level of student to teach. So I want to devote more time into developing that skill set, right? So then when they become a brown belt and they can go on to just be an instructor, right? They've already developed those tools. It's kind of like when at purple belt, you start learning more leg locks. So then when you get to brown belt, you're already more or less proficient at them.
Yeah, makes sense.
For those who don't know, like standard rules, most leg locks are off the table until brown belt. So you don't want to be a brown belt and then be like, so tell me, what is a toe hold? And you have no idea, right? You want to start learning that before you get there. And so I have that same sort of mentality for instructing. Purple belts, when I want to develop the tools in that student's instructor to be, so when they get their brown belt, they're kind of already good to go, if that makes sense.
It does. Now, I wanted to ask, do you think it's essential for belt progression for someone to teach? Because not everyone is in the position where they can teach, where they may want to actually teach. It may not be something that they're interested in doing at all. So how closely linked do you think is belt progression to actually teaching?
For me, they don't have to become a teacher or an instructor. In terms of how important I think it is, if someone came to me and they said, man, I have zero interest in teaching jiu-jitsu. I absolutely love jiu-jitsu. I want to get my black belt, all this, but I could not care less about teaching it or being an instructor or whatever. Is that going to make me say, well, this person won't progress? No. However, as a minimum, the reason that they need to understand a bit of teaching jiu-jitsu is more just for that sort of cliche, you learn so much when you teach, So they would need to develop their teaching skills enough so they understand what they're doing, because when you're then a higher belt, the lower belts look to you. And let's say you're a brown belt or a black belt even, and you have no interest in teaching or whatever, but a white belt and a blue belt comes to you and asks you a question. I mean, it happens all the time, right? Yeah. Lower belts ask higher belts.
Yeah, of course.
So if you want to be my student and you're then carrying my reputation essentially, right? That's how I look at belts being awarded under different instructors. You're carrying that person's reputation with you, right? So I want to make sure any belts I give out are credible, and especially if I'm giving out higher belts like brown belts and black belts. So if you want to carry that belt from me, in my opinion, you've got to know what you're talking about. You don't have to be an instructor or ever teach a jiu-jitsu class if you don't want to. But if a lower belt turns to you and asks you a question like a basic question, how do I escape side control? And you don't know how to articulate that and teach that to that student, that then reflects badly on me because they go, man, Adam's brown belts are freaking terrible. They don't know how to do X, Y, Z, right? So you need to understand some level of teaching, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Right. But I think that's not only, I mean, that maybe came across wrong. It maybe sounded a bit more like for me, it was important for you to uphold my reputation. I didn't mean it like that. I'm more like, it's more also for your understanding of the technique. It's the fact that you can articulate that to someone else shows that you actually understand it, opposed to just being, if you ask an English teacher why a sentence is structured a certain way, right, they know because they understand it. Whereas you ask a native speaker, they're like, I don't know, bro, it just is.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't want my students, the higher belt students, for their answer to be, it just is.
Yeah.
I want them to actually understand it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Right. And if you can understand it, you can teach it to someone, whether you want to be a teacher or not. Right. So yeah, purple belts when I want to start developing that in my students. And then if they want to be an instructor, brown belts when I feel comfortable to go like, this is, blah, blah teaches the morning classes.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Then you can give them like a rostered sort of class to teach.
Yeah. Yeah.
Makes sense. So this reminded me of something that I've been meaning to ask you. It's off topic, but related to belt structure. If someone joined your gym and say they were a purple belt, they said they were a purple belt, but then you assess them and they're like lucky to be a blue belt under your sort of guidance, under your opinion, and they wanted to train there more or less, they wanted to train there full time. They wanted to be a purple belt under Adam Childs. Would you take the belt off them?
No.
Because I've heard of this happening.
Yeah, I could see it happening. Look, I had a black belt come train with me who said that under me he wanted to go back to white belt, and I was like, no. Reason being is it's someone at some point in time decided that person was worth that belt, right, and awarded it to them. So, they, under that person at that point in their life, they earned that belt. Right?
What if they got their blue belt online?
I could see your grin. I could see your grin getting bigger and bigger. I'm like, he's got something.
No, legit. Yeah. If someone walked into your gym and they did that fucking blue belt academy online and they walked in with a blue belt, would you take it off them?
No, I probably wouldn't. But I guess there's two things I'll point out. Yeah, one being, for me, it's someone decided that they were worth that belt and gave it to them at that point in time. So, whether they earned it by my standards or not, they earned it by that person's standards, right? If you got your law degree from TAFE and then you walk into Harvard and Harvard goes like, no, I'm taking that. Like that, you can't take away something from a different institute, if that makes sense.
I agree.
Right?
I agree with that.
However, and also it's not like I do run a background check on everyone that comes in. Someone comes in saying they're a purple belt, they're wearing a purple belt, and I go, in my opinion, they're lucky to be a blue. It's not like there's some mega database of...
Unless they were like a fake belt or something like that.
Well, you'd know if they were a super fake belt, right? But there's not... it's not like I can just type them into some massive database and this person actually isn't a purple belt. Some people register with IBJJF, some people don't, right? It's not like judo where there's this one governing body that you're registered with. So I wouldn't take their belt off. However, if they did come in and they were a purple belt and I'm like, man, this dude could maybe be a blue belt, they're still going to be a purple belt, but instead of me I'm essentially in my head going to be looking at them like a blue belt. So they would wear that purple belt, but then it would be X amount of years until in my head they've even become a purple belt, and then however many more years until they got their brown. So they might sit on that purple belt. Instead of purple belt being a 1.5, 2 year journey, it might become like a 6-year journey for them or something like that. Right. So I would never take the belt off, but I will have an internal grading of that student, and they'll just continue to wear that same belt until they get in line and then become a brown belt.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But online academy blue belt.
Look, we'll just have I will let you take out your frustration. All right. I'll cut your deal, Kieren. Whenever someone comes into the gym and they have an online belt, I will allow you to be the mad enforcer against that person, so you can take it out on them.
Oh shit.
This is gonna be a bit of a shorter episode. I do just want to, there's only one other point I want to go over, right? Essentially, to summarize, blue belt, fine to teach kids, technically could be a white belt to teach kids. Again, this is all just my opinion, right? I said right at the beginning, there was a whole thing that came out ages ago saying no one under black belt should teach, blah, blah, blah. And then you got other people letting blue belts teach. Blah, blah. So I'm just one dude with an opinion, right? Which is blue belt, fine to teach kids. Technically could be a white belt really to teach kids, but blue belt, fine to teach kids. Purple belt, I want to start developing that student, brown belt, you could be an instructor. Ideally, if you could flick a switch, you would have no one under black belt teach, but that's just not how the world works, right? The one thing I will point out though is it's sometimes it's even more of an issue than just like it was for me. Oh, being a new business, I had a baby, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes logistically, there's no other option. I'll give you an example. We had, I previously worked as a manager for the Alliance Association. I spent years working as managing the different affiliates around the world for Alliance. And we had a gym where the head instructor, not just an instructor, but the head instructor was a purple belt, which you think like, well, man, that just doesn't make sense to have a head instructor as a purple belt. And maybe when he opened the gym, I could be wrong, but he may have only even been a blue belt when he opened the gym, right? But this guy, his gym was in Yellowknife. Do you know where Yellowknife is?
Never heard of it.
So you go to the US and Canadian border, right? And then you go north, and then you go north, and then you go north, and then you keep going north. And then when you get to the Arctic Circle, you go north, right? It is so far, like it's super north. Like he's in like a town in, like essentially in the Arctic Circle with, I don't know what the population, hang on, I can find out for you. What is the population?
Hey, Jamie, pull that up for us. Yeah. Population of Yellowknife.
Let me find out. Hang on.
Wow. So he's a blue belt opening a gym effectively in what I'm assuming is maybe his hometown or something like that.
Dude, it's a town of less than 20,000 people.
Yeah,
right. Like it is super north of Canada. It is the capital city of Canada's Northwest Territories, right? Like, so super small town, right? But this guy did a lot to stay educated. Every year he flew specifically Lucas Lepre up, and he would do like a weekend seminars. He would fly down all the time to Atlanta, where the US headquarters for Alliance was. So he made efforts to continue to be educated. It wasn't like he opened the gym as his full-time thing. He had his other business, but he was in a town, not even a city, right? In a town with, next to no people. There's no like other high-level jiu-jitsu gym he can go to. You got to imagine it probably started with, I don't know all the backstory, but I assume it started with him wanting to learn jiu-jitsu and train jiu-jitsu with his friends and everything. And in a small town, they didn't have a place to train.
So he opened a gym.
Yeah. So, if you look at it like that, I'm not really against whatever belt being an instructor. Okay. It is going to depend on where you are, and you definitely have to be wary of when it turns into a business, opposed to just some friends training in a garage and, you know, one of you being the default instructor, right? If it does turn into a business, obviously where you are in the world and whatever state you're in, you have to be wary of like the public liability, and, you know, you may be required to have certain credentials to be allowed to teach and charge people money to learn from you. But that stuff aside, man, if you're someone like bloody Yellowknife, man, you can't knock the dude for being a blue belt or a purple belt and being an instructor. Like,
kudos to him.
Yeah, it was that or zero jiu-jitsu. I also knew another guy. You're going to hate this. He wasn't an online blue belt, but him and his friends were completely self-taught from just watching shit online. Him and his friends just trained together in a garage.
They rolled. I'm totally cool with
it. Yeah, they rolled. Yeah, and he even flew over. He visited the gym in Brazil, right? His name was George. I think he was from Germany. It was super tough, bro. He was legit. And he was essentially self-taught from the internet.
That's
right?
impressive.
You know, so if he then went on to open a gym, I'm not sure. He obviously ended up grading under someone. But yeah, I will just say as a blanket statement, you know, sometimes when you hear blue belt instructor, you know, like those clickbaity articles, like blue belt instructor, purple belt instructor. Well, you don't know, man. Maybe it's a dude in
fucking
at the research station in Antarctica.
Yeah.
You know, like
laying down the mats.
Yeah. What other choice do you have, right? Yeah. So with that, if you look at it like that as well, it's cool.
Yeah, totally cool.
Just making sure that, you know, if you are listening to this thinking sick, I'm going to do it. Right. Well, if you're super remote, make sure you cover your bases. You don't want to get sued. You know, I've got another student who started teaching as part of, he's a blue belt, and he started teaching for another organization as part of like a sort of a therapy for adolescents who have really, who have had troubled childhood, or adolescents who have really
like
bad
a youth program.
Yeah, sort of thing. Right. And one of the things that let's call it youth program, I forget the actual name, the people who run it checking what credentials they need to make sure he has and what insurances they have to have for him to be allowed to teach, right? Because he's not walking there as a black belt.
Yeah.
Right. Can he teach as a blue belt? For sure. It's barely jiu-jitsu, right? He's teaching people as essentially like therapy, you know, coping mechanisms and things through jiu-jitsu, right? If you said, oh, well, he needs to be a black belt to do that, I'd be like, dude, what are you talking about? This guy, like, he knows enough to help these kids, right? Doesn't need to be a black belt to do that. But as long as you make sure legally you're cool.
Yeah, that's like...
Because you don't mess with the law, bro.
Especially Adam's law. It's the law. Yeah, man. Oh, it was good.
That was... hopefully people got something out of that. Kieren, you will teach kids one day.
Maybe. We'll talk about it later. But yeah, so if you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share the love on social media. Share it to your story and we'll reshare it. Follow us on Instagram. We are on Instagram, Beyond Jiu-Jitsu _podcast. Follow us on Spotify. We're nearly at 100 followers on Spotify.
Please, guys, follow us on Spotify.
We're not going to beg, but we're begging.
Yeah, that does. It
really helps.
You know, it's a bit of a, I don't know how you feel about this as a YouTuber, but I watch heaps of YouTube, and, you know, you're always like, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, now that I have an online platform, it helps bump you up the list, right? If you've got more people following on Spotify, helps.
It really does. So, and a big one, if you want to submit a question to the show, as a bit of a spoiler alert, we do have a Q&A episode coming soon. It's going to be episode number 20.
Episode 20. This was episode 17.
Yep. So if you want your question read out on the show, or if you want to send us an audio clip of your question, however you want to submit it, please feel free to shoot that through on the DMs on our Instagram, which is, again, Beyond Jiu-Jitsu _podcast. It's the best place to submit your question. And if you want to submit an audio format, just let me know and we can sort that out as well. But Q&A episode number 20. So if you want your question on the show, get it in now, because we're already compiling and locking in some questions.
Yep. Also, if you really feel like it, there's a link tree on our Instagram, takes you to a Patreon. That's cool too. You don't have to, but for those who are into that sort of thing.
Support us on Patreon.
Yeah.
And on Patreon, what are we doing there? So we're going to be doing
nudes.
Plenty of nudes on requests. Adam exclusively is doing the nudes, but we are doing live Q&As.
You can see how my Batman 6-pack is progressing.
Yeah. Shit. So we do live Q&As once a month on Patreon, and we're also doing live instructional, so jiu-jitsu lessons and instructionals over on the Patreon. So get around it if you're keen. But until next time, thanks for listening.
Laters.